Good morning, my name is Giles Edwards, and I'm here with the director of Daniel Isn't Real, a fellow by the name of Adam, who introduced the film last night, which was its which debut? Canadian debut.
Because Canadian. We've played in Korea and in Australia, so in the U.S.
Okay, so those are good population centers to introduce yourself to. You mentioned last night during the question and answer session the development of the project was approximately 7.5 years. I was wondering if you might elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I think it was almost exactly 7.5 years from when I first read the novel and decided I wanted to try to make a movie of it until the world premiere at South by Southwest in March. So at that time, seven years ago or so, I was directing music videos and really wanting to make a feature film. And I was reading a lot of books, looking for material, and I was writing a lot of scripts. And I was at a party in Los Angeles where I met Brian, who had just moved there from New York. And I hit it off with him really well, and he told me about this novel that he'd written. And I read it immediately that weekend and called him at the beginning of the week and said, man, I want to figure out how to turn this into a movie. And we started working on it together at that time. And when we'd finished a polished version of the script, I realized, there's no way I could get the money for this movie. I've never made a movie before. So then we wrote together another movie, a very low-budget movie, with the intention of let's get something made and prove that I can make a movie. And that was a film called Some Kind of Hate that played at Fantasia several years ago. So it's, the process over all of that time, we kept on coming back to it and revising it and talking to different producers who were maybe going to do it, and nothing happened. And at one point, I even toyed with the idea of maybe letting somebody else direct it, and I'm really glad that I changed course on that because it turned out to be something very singular to me. And we made the other movie, and that's how we met our producing partner, Spectre Vision, who became exactly the right people to get this film.
I've heard that before. I spoke with Panos Cosmatos during the red carpet brief interview I had with him last year for Mandy, and that came up, and another filmmaker this year has mentioned Spectre Vision.
Richard Stanley, because he's just made a film with them as well.
Yeah, they seem to sort of just little guardian angels for
they're
creative-minded.
They refer to themselves as being filmmaker-driven, and what that means is that they really align themselves with the director in terms of sharing the vision and making that movie, as opposed to bringing on a director to make a product for them. So they were really great partners on it. And I think they have a combination of the skill of making something really good at a lower budget, and also loving the idea of making something really unique and artistic. And those were the two things about Daniel Isn't Real that prevented anybody else from wanting to do it, because they would read the script and say, God, this is really expensive and it's insane, so it's just such a losing proposition. And Spectre Vision read it and said, this could be lower budget and it's insane, so let's do it.
Now, you mentioned just now that you got your filming experience through Some Kind of Hate. I know that you hadn't filmed in New York City until Daniel Isn't Real, yes?
Yeah, I used to live in New York a long time ago, and when I filmed some music videos there, and my friends' bands would play, and I would film them, and I was making little experimental things out in the streets of New York, but nothing that was sort of a bigger commercial project like this. Some Kind of Hate was filmed in outside of Los Angeles, and most of what I had worked on was around there.
You remarked now on the insanity of the movie, as it were, the reaction to it. Would you please tell us a little bit about the visual aesthetic that you were aiming for and the various choices behind that?
Yeah. So part of the idea was to replicate the feeling of a manic episode, to sort of be inspired by what that might feel like. And so it was important to me that the movie have an arc that moved from a kind of isolationist feeling to something that's extremely colorful and fast-moving and overwhelming. And I developed the idea of kinetic maximalism as sort of the aesthetic that I was going for overall, as opposed to a sort of common horror movie style where things are very still and quiet and spooky and gray. I wanted to take things in the opposite direction and say we can do something that's anxious and terrifying in bright lights, and we can make colors and excitement feel overwhelming and too much and overstimulating and terrifying, rather than sort of removing things. And so I structured the movie around an evolution of its style, where it becomes increasingly dense and increasingly colorful, increasing the camera movements. And I drove everybody crazy with I wrote like a 40-page design document that everybody involved with the movie was able to look at, and it would sort of take you through, these scenes are this kind of style. Then when we come over here to these next scenes, here's the way that they change, and really made sure to try to follow that as much as possible, because when you're in the moment, day to day, and you're just doing these little pieces, it was important to me that you could sort of, when you watch the movie, you'll see at the beginning it looks and feels one certain way, and then towards the end, in some ways it's totally different, but you can make sense of how you've gotten from one place to the other. And that's both a way to make the film exciting and engaging, and also reflect the main character's mind. So I think, to me, I'm very obsessed with style and making sure that I'm making a lot of cinematic choices and doing things that are cool, but that those are connected to what this story is about. So I guess in some ways it's about finding stories that allow you to make those kind of stylistic choices.
There was a visual, sort of physical stylistic thing when, toward the end, when one of the characters is trapped, there's this sort of museum set piece with these various tables of implements.
Yeah.
Is there a story behind those? Was that from a backstory of either of the characters?
Well,
there were a lot of them.
Yeah, that's the suggestion that what's happening here has been going on for a very long time, and there's a lot of there's a fair amount of sort of literary references or references to things from the past. There's a couple moments throughout the movie where we see Hieronymus Bosch paintings. There's a reference to William Blake. There's a reference to the Bible. And all of this is suggesting a kind of, a life cycle that's more in tune with human civilization rather than an individual 20-year-old human psychology. And this set piece that you're describing has a kind of, cosmic feel. We were always fighting with being inspired by the end of 2001 and also not wanting to rip it off. So there's certain design elements that that might reference that, but don't overly reference it. It's
certainly a different. The lighting is very different, much more clinical, obviously, in 2001.
Yeah.
More, as you described it, what was ultraviolet?
Yeah, ultraviolet. There's an ultraviolet vibe. Ultraviolet, which is not a real color, is the color of Daniel and of sort of his soul, and we see bits and pieces of that throughout the movie, and it sort of increases. And that so that goes back to the thing I'm saying about how when that color's not in the movie, we're in this isolationist. Things are a little bit sort of cooler, and there's less colors. And when as his psychology becomes more important to the story, we get this cool, wicked color. So it's both related to his sort of presence, and it also is it's a fun style. And at the end, that I think that color and the conflict of those colors really opens up. There's that color amber that's in the room as well, and the purple sort of cuts through that. And those two oppositional colors, I think, are an idea about the oppositional psychologies of the two characters.
I think those are Easter colors as well.
Easter?
Yep, I think that purple and gold are traditionally associated with that, so you have another layer that you nab there.
Yeah, an Easter egg, if you will.
Well, speaking of going back in time, you had an encouraging word for aspiring filmmakers who may not be getting their projects done as quickly as they'd like. You mentioned watching a lot of old French movies. Did you have any particular titles that either comforted you or influenced you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hiroshima Mon Amour, which is I had seen last year at Marienbad years ago, and that's really fantastic. But then I saw Hiroshima Mon Amour much more recently, and it really blew me away. It's a rewatchable, like, beautiful.
Oh yeah, Resnais is probably my favorite French director.
Oh really?
So,
yeah. There's something just so juicy and amazing about him. Also, Je t'aime, which is
that's
it's
time travel.
Yeah, it's like time travel. It's like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You know, very very much like in that mode. I love those movies. I mean, I think the French of everybody found the most interesting approach to genre. So it was actually movies like Martyrs and Trouble Every Day and Calvaire that really inspired me to try to make horror movies that could be meaningful. And that goes all the way back to, if you watch Eyes Without a Face or Judex, those are both movies that are, it's like, it's this kind of just genre horror premise, but his artistry and sort of belief in the nightmarish visions elevates them into something else. I find that to be extremely inspiring.
No, it's good. I'm glad that you brought those up, because actually Eyes Without a Face and Last Year at Marienbad are on our list. So
cool.
You'll be speaking to some people who know what you're talking about.
Yeah, those are incredible movies.
And Je t'aime was actually the second review I ever wrote
for
the site as just a reader contributor. So that was something I saw in sci-fi film class back in college, film school days.
It makes a great double feature with La Jetée, doesn't it? Like this kind of like weird, the French using science fiction as an excuse for psychedelic filmmaking, sort of strange explorations.
The exploration of memory in particular. I remember that. And also, Je t'aime somewhat recently came out on DVD after years and years in the wilderness. So that's
I signed up for the Criterion
Oh
channel.
yeah, that'll cover it. Yeah.
I basically have all everything else. All I need to do is watch the. And if you're speaking about young filmmakers, that's something that I really highly recommend is to especially if you're a genre filmmaker, to dig more deeply into cinema history for no other reason than mine it for shots to use and visual strategies, and watch your Bresson and your Rene, watch that more than you watch John Carpenter, because all of your peers are watching John Carpenter, and if you get into the Robert Bresson, you're going to find stuff that nobody else is inspired by.
Sound nice, and segues nicely. You had a nice riff on ripping things off. I know there were a few shots you were very pleased with. One of you might mention those again.
Sure. Well, there's a couple shots that that directly rip off strategies from The Exorcist. There's one that's like a sort of it references a very iconic shot from The Exorcist, where the priest is standing outside the house and there's smoke and he's holding his bag, and we kind of copied that on purpose to put you in the mode of thinking, oh my god, is this scene going to be like an exorcism? What's happening now? But then there's also a scene towards the beginning where the camera moves to reveal a family dynamic, so moving from seeing the mother and father in conflict to revealing the little kid seeing the fight. And that's something that also happened in The Exorcist, which is a shot that I tried to study William Friedkin as much as possible, because he makes scenes of people talking to each other feel like an action movie by the way that he shoots them. And then Persona was also a huge one for me, and so I'm constantly trying to replicate the imagery from Persona, where you see two faces sort of blending together. But then there's other sort of more obscure moments from Persona where he's just so bold with what he does. And so there's a shot where the camera drops from Hannah Marks's face to reveal something she's looking at on her phone, and that was taken directly from a moment in Persona as well.
Yeah, it did make me wonder because there was the young actor who plays Daniel, Patrick Schwarzenegger. I couldn't help but think and hope I was right in thinking of Christian Bale's performance of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho.
Yeah, absolutely. I think American Psycho was important to us when we were writing the movie from just the point of view of the ambiguity in that film between what's mental and what's real, and then also in this sort of sociopathic upper class point of view about the world, which was something that becomes very important to Daniel's character. The sort of like, I'm handsome and wear cool clothes, and I'm intelligent, and so therefore I deserve more than everybody else. Is a really interesting sociopathology that we definitely thought about from the Bret Easton Ellis universe.
Okay, yes, he captured it, rather well, I think. Definitely channeled that. And I'm getting a notice from our friend over there, so I have one final question for you. Can you recommend a favorite hometown restaurant?
From my hometown? Favorite hometown restaurant? Well, I really love Greenblatt's, which is a Jewish deli. Where you can get your corned beef sandwiches and your pastrami sandwiches and your tuna melts. And I always go there and say, "Can you give me a tuna melt with like some kind of cheddar cheese that's been in a cave for like 10 years?" And they're open on Christmas. It's really fun to go there to go to the Jewish deli and get your pastrami sandwiches on Christmas morning.
Where's your hometown?
I live in Los Angeles.
Your hometown?
I've lived there for like 10, 15 years.
But like, where were you born?
In Boston? No, I was born in Tampa, Florida.
Is it a hometown where you were born?
I don't know.
It's
home is where the heart is.
It's his choice, and Greenblatt sounds like a fantastic recommendation.
I'm just gonna see if Mike Gingle is here, but no reason to rush out until I've got the confirmation.
Yeah, we can talk. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I guess quickly. Obviously, we mentioned on the this film not being terribly usual. When you made it, do you have a target audience in mind, or just gonna do what you can?
I don't know. I mean, the target audience, I always try to sort of imagine somebody whose favorite movie it would be. And I do that with everything that I do. Like, I imagine character, and so I thought that younger women who like horror movies, who've had experience with guys like Luke and Daniel, would really get something out of this movie.
I can vouch for that.
Well, that's a good note. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Kayla. As always, thank you for your assistance.
Thank you, Giles, for being such a good